So I guess some of you have read the title of the email. Today I wanted to take on the topic of valence. And this is something that we have dealt with multiple times in this group. So valence is what refers to our interpretation of sensation as being pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. And many of us have the impression that it's something that's kind of baked in to the sensations, that some sensations like pain or crying or some sensations like that, that they are inherently unpleasant and that other sensations are inherently pleasant. How this links into what we have done before. So with practices such as metta, we can actually train ourselves to interpret pleasantness more. So kind of to just in a very technical sense, train our mind to recognize pleasantness or to even produce pleasantness more often, and to also relate it to different events in our experience. And it is also possible to pay more attention to valence that we experience and to also kind of reprogram negative valence. So it's also possible to train equanimity, for example. The quality of equanimity is to experience things as rather neutral. So to not be too swayed by positive sensations, to become too enthusiastic or enamored with positive sensations, but to also not take negative sensations too dramatically. So just to perceive appearances in awareness as they are. So to see physical sensations as purely physical sensations that appear in a particular location with their sensate qualities, but not necessarily interpret them as good or bad, as pleasant or unpleasant, but just to not even experience them as neutral, but just to experience them. It's, for example, like watching, I don't know, a TV show or watching a movie and not having any attitude about the content, to not even have the quality of an attitude, to just observe the content of the movie and to not add any interpretation or any opinion about that. And this, so in some Buddhist theoretical frameworks, it is assumed that this layer of interpretation also correlates to the duality that exists between the perceiver and the perceived. And for instance, when this duality drops, then this interpretation process is also removed. Then sensations simply experience themselves as they are, and it's possible to make inferences from knowledge that we gather, or it's possible to experience physiological unpleasantness that would, for example, motivate us to seek for help. But it is theorized, and that's what some people experience, that once that duality weakens, then we also do not interpret something as pleasant or unpleasant, and we also don't form an attachment towards that attitude. So usually when we interpret things as unpleasant, we tend to avoid them, which is also a type of attachment, because we then tend to seek something that's more pleasant, or we refuse reality, or we don't tend to strive for things that are pleasant just because they're pleasant, which is also a type of attachment. So we have a more non-attached relationship towards reality. And so what I wanted to do today, I want to do a noting practice where I would also guide you to try and find the unpleasant sensations in your experience and label them using positive notions. So I will guide this through gradual practice, but it would be good before we begin to find some simple words or simple concepts that instinctively give you a good feeling. For example, for me, I like colors, I like food a lot, I like flowers, and then I would do a noting practice, and whenever I feel something, I would just label it chocolate or cake or I don't know, a rose. I would just come up with something even superficial, but just something that's nice and that instantly gives me that feeling of excitement. And I would just make that mental label on whatever arises. So maybe you can take a moment to reflect, to kind of prepare some noting vocabulary or noting, or at least domain from which you would take out those labels. If you feel like it, you can also write it in the chat here. Maybe you can inspire others. But yeah, let's take maybe 2 minutes to prepare some labels. This could be something like see, beer, feel. Or whenever you feel unhappy, just note beer. I like this one. Yeah, I mean, I would recommend to prepare at least 10 or so to begin with, or about 20, just to prime yourself to come up with these labels. Once you get into it, then labels start coming up, so your association becomes activated and more labels come up. Maybe 10, 20. You can also label beer. You can it's totally valid to label everything as chocolate. So I will guide the meditation, but before we begin, if you could prepare, it would be good if you could prepare some labels just for yourself. Because I imagine that some labels that I would find pleasant, you would maybe find them ridiculous or irritating or... Okay, so let's begin with today's guidance. As usually, take a comfortable posture, but not necessarily too comfortable, so don't get soft. Maybe take a posture that you can maintain for some 20 minutes, but that might cause you a little bit of pain. And I would recommend you to close your eyes for this one. And let's just take a deep breath in And you can exhale with a sigh. And again, take a deep breath in. Just allow the body to relax. We tend to collect a lot of tension in our muscles, especially in the face, when we talk and when we laugh, from group activities, group interactions. You can also maybe do some face stretches if that helps. All right, so at the beginning of this practice, let's first try to generate some good feelings just from the words that you suggested. I'm going to read a few of them, and you can try to visualize a scene in which you are in that environment, and you can tune into the nice feeling that brings you. So like how when we do metta, we try to maintain that good feeling about a person or about a memory, or generally with the pleasant sensations in the body. So in a similar way, let's try to feel the joy and the good feeling of a beer. And if it makes you laugh, that's perfectly fine. Just focus on the sensations in the body and where they arrive and how they feel. Or a hug. A nice, heartfelt embrace. With a loved one, whether it's a friend or a romantic partner. Or being in the sun. The feeling of warm sunshine. Or the joy that we can get from a dog, for example. And try to find where and how these nice feelings appear in the body. When a smile feels nice, for example, what exactly is it that gives it that nice feeling? Try to explore the very fine physical sensations that arise when something feels good. All right, now you can drop that. And for a moment, let's just do nothing. You don't have to try to do anything or try to not do anything. You can just let your mind do what it spontaneously wants to do. You can let it observe, let it not observe, let it go on a tangent. Think about whatever, not think about anything. If you notice that there are some expectations of what the mind should do, or that there is some kind of good meditation or bad meditation, just try to drop that for now. And before we continue, just do a little check-in. What does it feel like right now to be you? And you can slowly start to anchor the awareness in the breath. So slowly allow the awareness to start following the flow of the breath through the body, using that as an anchor for your presence. And while keeping that in the background, start scanning your experience, both the body and the mind. for sensations. And whenever you observe something without trying to change it, just notice whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or whether it's rather neutral. You can maybe linger for a brief moment on each sensation and try to examine the qualities at the sensate level that appear to give rise to this interpretation. So there is no preference for any part of the body or any type of sensations. You can just scan the experience. And whatever appears to be salient, you can just inspect its valence. And try if you can notice at a granular level, what is it about sensations that makes them feel pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. If, for instance, you start noticing that when you start analyzing sensations, that perhaps there arises a continuous narrative, like an internal conversation, maybe then it's time to move on to the next sensation. It's not our goal now to have internal debates. We are right now interested in our sensory experience. You can also use mental labels: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Whenever you notice a sensation, label it. And if you get distracted or anything like that, don't forget to label any sensations that arise around that. So we're not trying to produce experience or to direct it in any way. We are just observing it. All right, and now you can slowly bring up your nice replacement labels. And you can try to label anything that's unpleasant using those labels. Feel free to try a few, and if some of them work really well, if the goal is to feel, for example, when you, if for example you have pain in your foot or something like that, or something that causes you annoyance or anything that you have been labeling until now as unpleasant. The goal is to use a positive label that will cause an emotional reaction, an instant emotional reaction. So whenever there is something that is unpleasant noticed, you immediately link it to an instinctive positive emotional reaction. So you can also try labeling all physical sensations as chocolate. And for instance, when I do this, I even like to exaggerate a little bit. And I would, with my internal voice, say things like, and you are a purple flower, and you are a pink flower. So don't avoid creating the sense of enthusiasm whenever any sensation arises. You're happy that that sensation is there because you can label it with something cute and sweet and something that you like. But if that's not your thing, then you don't need to do it, of course. And if there is a part of your mind that is objecting this or that feels annoyed, you can also give it a treat or a hug or a piece of chocolate or something that would also make the grumpy part of you feel integrated. And try and see if something has changed about your experience of these sensations. If their unpleasant experience has softened at least a little bit. So we often resort to very clear-cut interpretation of our emotions and other sensations. And the goal of this exercise is to show that it is possible to expand that experience and to, on a very technical level, if we could say it like that we can also experience positive reactions alongside some sensations that would typically be classified as negative. All right, and you can take one more beer. And let's bring that to a close. And just before we start talking again, you can maybe just scan your body and scan your experience with eyes open, just to see what the general feeling is and if it's any different than how it was before.